My name is Charlotte Brown, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Gregg Museum of Art and Design. And over the weekend, I was reading an article written last year by Garth Clark, who some of you may recognize as one of the major dealers in ceramics, due to ceramics in America, who lamented the decline of the market. Actually, what's happened is that ceramics have become so important and so valuable, they are now simply sold as art at Sotheby's and at major dealers and shown at the Metropolitan and other museums like that, which of course is something many of you suspected all along would happen. But I took great pleasure. There was a wonderful line in his article that said, and of course, functional pottery is a dead letter. Where are you from, boy? You're not from here. And the number of people here and the enthusiasm for the exhibition and the enthusiasm for the Greggs collecting ceramics, particularly North Carolina pottery, all make me feel very positive, if not a little anxious, because it does break, nevertheless. So I would like to welcome you to what will be, I think, an informal talk by Vernon and Pamela and Travis. And I will introduce them to you for those of you who, for some reason, I can say that because I grew up in Chatham County, and I never went to Jugtown until I was a mature person. So I'm guilty of the most crass ignorance, and grateful to all the writers in North Carolina, but Pam and Vernon, especially among them, for educating me. And so, without further ado, thank you for coming, and I will introduce in reverse order Travis Owens, who is a graduate of the College of Design and of North Carolina State University, and of whom we are just so proud. The fabulous Pamela Owens, who is Yankeedom's gift to North Carolina, and Dr. Vernon Owens, who holds an honorary degree, a PhD, from North Carolina State University for his accomplishments in the fine arts. So,
Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. First of all, we'd like to thank Charlotte for approaching us originally to ask us, to invite us to do an exhibit. It's a wonderful honor for us at Jugtown, and the show, as you can see, makes our pots just really stand out. They just do a wonderful job. And we're really pleased to be here and to have this exhibit here. And we decided at home, we discussed this presentation tonight, and we decided rather than making a formal talk, we'd have Charlotte pick 6 early Jugtown pots and 6 of the more current Jugtown pots, and we'd talk about them, and then we would kind of branch out a little bit from there about Jugtown. And in the process, you folks would just ask us questions. And so it would just be an informal talk where everybody could be involved. Is this going off and on?
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, there it is. So I think we could start and have Vernon talk, maybe pick an early shape and talk a little bit about when he first came to Jugtown and the shape, and then how it went from there.
I don't think I need a microphone. And so, one year is good, I guess, as I thought I was, or I had no idea what I was doing. I went from making pie plates and sugar bowls and pitchers and that kind of thing to trying to make this kind of pottery. And of course, my brother Bobby went to work same day I did, and Charles Moore went to work with us. And Charles had worked at Jugtown 5 years before, and from 1952 till 1957, I think. He had the experience of burning the pots and knew a little something about the glaze, but we was all pretty much in a learning process. And so I just started making pots, and I started out more or less making things like this casserole here, and plates and pitchers. And then we started into making the bases pretty soon, but what I was trying to do was make like this base or these bases. And I probably would have been better off if I'd sort of looked at the pot and then just worked at making my version of it. I tried to make them like that or like that. And I didn't think much about it. What I was doing, I thought it, was okay. And then after 2 or 3 years, I began to think, well, I can't make somebody else's pots. I've got to make my version of the pot. And that's what all. It just, actually, it's almost like people are ready for a change, and you couldn't sell lead glaze pottery anymore, because even though we could make it safe to use, we had to, we could make it and pass government regulations on it, that we could still make lead glazes, but we couldn't tell people they didn't have lead in it. And when you told people it had lead in them, they didn't want anything to do with it. And so it was a matter of people wanting to buy pottery enough that they would accept the change, or they're ready for the change. I don't know which one, but anyhow, it all worked out, and we survived. And people still buying the stuff. But the shapes, we do gas fire now. For when we went away from fire and part of the pottery with wood, we switched to oil, and then we went from oil. After about 20 years, we fired with oil, and then we switched over to gas. And we still do a lot of wood firing, but we do right much out with gas now. And the clays we're still using as much local clay as we can, and then we buy clay to mix with what we dig, and just had to work out. We went from the low temperature earthenware up to the higher temperature. We had to work for our clays to get them to work to fit the glazes, and the glazes to fit the clay, and that kind of thing. So it's all worked out. So if anybody, Pam can go through her little spiel, and then we'll just let everybody know. I think that would be great.
Well, I think Vernon's given you a good description of pottery that fits into the realm of the traditional pottery and why it's still there, because it did change when it had to change. And anything that's good and vibrant is always changing. And I think that when the Busbys came to the area, Moore County, Randolph County, and they fell in love with the pots, they wanted to create a pottery, and they created an aesthetic. And as Vernon said, when he first got there, he looked at this pot to make an ancient form. He looked at Ben's version of an ancient form on the different ones, and that made it hard. And then he eventually looked at the ancient forms in books and things, and he came up with his own version. And I think when I went to Jugtown, even though we didn't talk about the fact that it was a traditional pottery, and the pottery had gone through changes, and Vernon had come to that realization. We didn't talk to it right away. I came in and I saw these shapes that Vernon was making. Of course, he was the head potter, and he was the potter that we all looked up to, and we wanted to make pots like this. And so when I looked at the pots that he was making, where I had come from, the school that I had studied at for my first pottery experience, we always studied the ancient forms and the ancient pottery traditions, which Jugtown in a way, and that people understand that Jugtown is always growing. It's not going to always be the same. I mean, there are people who only like old Jugtown, and that's fine. But for it to go on and for us to have customers that come and for it to be vital, we keep changing, and so we all try to figure out where we fit in there. Travis came along, and he may want to talk a little bit. When we came in here, I thought, this is Vernon's casserole. This is your casserole. This is from the city. Vernon grew up in it, Travis grew up in it, and his shapes are just very easily Jugtown. They just fit right in. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I think that what a lot of people don't realize is that the time that it takes. Pam puts in a lot of time working on the glazes, and it's a really tricky thing. It's a lot of trial and error, and a lot of disappointment. And it's something that we go through not only with the glazes but with the clay, because it's something that's natural. It's not a man-made thing, so it's constantly changing what the outcome is when you take the peel out. And that's something that not only us but the Busbys had to deal with, and potters for centuries, since people started making pottery, have had to deal with. And so that's something that consumes a lot of time, and people don't really think about it. They think we just go in and make the pots and they come out with them. Well, I just wanted to make it clear how much time that we put into making sure that things come out looking like they should. And that's what she was talking about when she saw Vernon's shapes in glazes that maybe it's not that they weren't good glazes, but they weren't quite right for the pot. And so that's been something that she's worked on constantly to make sure that the glaze matches the form. And that's something that I think Jugtown has always been consistent with. That the pots, the form is good and the glaze is good, and it meshes, don't you think? I mean, it's just the color should, what's the word I'm looking for? Should be a good complement to the form. Form and glaze should complement each other. And, but talking about change, that's the way pottery has stayed an industry in the world, is through change. And my grandfather, my great-grandfather, Vernon's grandfather, made the first pots for the Busbys, and he was a utilitarian potter. And you could see that influence in his pots, and he knew to survive as a potter, he had to change his shapes, and they didn't change drastically, but they had influence of the art pieces. And Ben's pots and Charlie Teague's pots, the ones that Charlie made, he wasn't there long, but his pots evolved, and Ben's pots evolved. Everybody's pots change over time, and so you can't just make the same thing for 80 years and expect people to be excited about it. So like they said, that's what I try to do. I try to just watch and take in everything
always run through a small batch, and then if that looks good, we do a pretty good sized batch, so we can get some of the pieces that we want and in the kind of firing we want, like a wood firing or a reduction firing.
Are the alkaline or the salt glazes more difficult to work with, or is salt glaze more difficult to work with?
Oh, no. I mean, the thing about salt glaze, you put the pot in the kiln and glaze it. And so you're not really expecting a certain thing out of it. Because you get a salt glaze, it depends, especially with a wood, burning a groundhog wood kiln. All the track's going one direction. And the kiln is going to be a lot hotter at the front than it is at the back. And temperature variation for salt glaze makes a tremendous amount of difference in how much salt the clay takes on and the color of it. And it also makes the reduction in the kiln makes so much difference in the color of the clay. So if you set out to make a certain kind of color for a salt glaze, most times you're going to fail. So, and that's one good thing about making salt glaze. You just put it in the kiln and you burn it and you do what you can to it. And that's all you can do. You know? It's going to work or it's not going to work, you know. And you take it out, and we went through this thing for years. I think we over-expected out of wood-fired kilns. And finally dawned on me 2 or 3 years ago that whatever comes out of that kiln is what comes out of it, you know. So you're going to get a half a kiln really good, you're going to get a fourth of it pretty good, and a fourth of it's probably going to be not too good, or not good, you know. So that is one thing about making salt glaze, but it's hard. It's hard to make salt glaze. It's hard to produce. It's hard to get it to come out like you want it to. And my uncle Vernon told me that when he was a young boy, all they made was salt glaze pottery. And then sometimes along about 1915, somewhere along in there, they began to make lead glaze pottery. And he said, when we got to making glaze pottery, glazing with lead and firing was so much easier, we just sort of went away from that salt glaze because of all the hard work and everything. And we was discussing this the other night in Pam about when the earthenware really in the area that we're in. When did the earthenware really come back? When did it really come back from the very early potters that sell in the area making earthenware, and then it's going to stoneware, salt glaze, and when the potters really started back to glazing with lead again, because when the Busbys got interested in the pottery in North Carolina and came to the area was because
feeling that you'd like to just break out and do something totally different? Or are you perhaps doing that?
Well, it wasn't like I left, when I went to school. It wasn't because I didn't go but 60 miles away. I mean, I'd go home on the weekends and on breaks, and I was making stuff all the time. And so, it actually worked out pretty good because as I went away from it, I was able to see what I really cared about. So once when I was away from it and I knew I couldn't go make a piece whenever I wanted to, I thought, well, I'm missing that. And so I was really glad to be back when I graduated. And I came back and I've been able to do, we have so much going on that I'm not constantly making pots, but it works out pretty good, and I'm happy with what I'm doing now, and that's, may change, as everybody's life changes, but, I think it's going to work out pretty good, and I'm not going to do anything radically different, I don't rock the boat or anything like that, but to answer your question, I'm pretty happy with the way it worked out. Did you have a question, Harriet?
I was asking the same question.
Oh.
I was just saying you had the urge to really change the design, which you said I didn't know from your design work teaching if you had urge to just modify the design.
Well, so many of the shapes that we work on are, classic designs, and sometimes I feel like it's sort of hard to improve on what we're doing, and that's sort of conceited, I guess. But it's been working, and so I hope it keeps on working. But that goes back to change. Things will evolve over time. I don't think the thing to do is to jump in and do something just really different all at once. I think that the way we work along and change slowly makes things work better and smoother for us. Does that sound right?
Yeah. And I was just going to say one thing. There have been quite a few potters in the Owens family through the generations, and there've also always been animals made at Jugtown, starting with Vernon's grandmother making some of the first ones. And Bailey also grew up in the pottery. She's here somewhere back there, and she said for a few years, don't tell people I'll make anything. People would come in and say, oh, she's cute. Would you make me a pot? And she would say, do not tell anyone I'll make a pot. I don't want to make a pot. I'm not interested. But in the last year, she has become very interested in sculpting animal forms and tiles. So she's been struck a little bit by the pottery bug, too. Also by the fact that people have seen them and liked them and offered her money for them. But I just wanted to say that Bailey's also making quite a bit of pottery now.
She'll be taking orders at the back of the room.
Can you talk a little bit about the popularity of the white glaze over time? Was there a certain point in the history, at least when you kind of owned the shop, that it had a sort of peak, or is it kind of consistent? I was always curious, because it seems to be popular with a certain group of people.
It is. That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. This white glaze, you know about the old white glaze or all the way through? Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting fact. The white glaze has had many variations. Like these two are fired in a salt kiln. So they're a white glaze, but there's also a little bit more depth added to them from being salted. And I think the white glaze was really popular early on for a long time, wasn't it?
his original bag. And it don't say true all-in slip, well, that's not true all-in slip. And there's a lot of substitutes come on the market in the last 20 years. But anyway, it sold really good in the middle 60s, the middle 70s, sold really good, and then it slacked off. And then, when green glaze, green color become popular a year back, then all the product, what we call product skin, it come back. And when they took it off the market, I happened to find out that they quit mining. A friend of mine called me and told me. And I called Standard Ceramic in Pittsburgh and asked them about it. And the guy said, I happen to know the Turnbull family that ran Standard Ceramic. And he said, no, I hadn't heard about it, but I'll check this out and I'll get back in touch with you. He called me back pretty quickly. He said, you're right. It's off the market. He said, I got a pretty good stock. How much do you want? So we bought enough that we still, but we limited it to how much all the product skin we make. But that's why we still able to make a real thing. And we don't make the interest.
Why was it taken off the market? Why was it taken off the market?
When?
Wow. It took off because
They just.
it wasn't profitable. The clay mine was worth more for a building site, so they done away with it. And that's why. And that's what's happened with the different kinds of clays and glazes, especially clays. There was a clay that we used to buy from up in Ohio, and we could mix like 25% with our local clay and just make a really good salt clay with it. And all of a sudden, this took off the market. And I ain't found nothing that'll replace that 25% of that clay till yet.
Other than speechless, how much of your local clay is, do you have your own clay tips that you use? Or traditionally, that's a thing that's gonna go away, or I've always been curious about.
Well, the new potters in the area have, a lot of them are interested in using local clay. And, so there's actually been some clay in the area, found in the last 10 years. And so there's more of the local clay being used right now than there was at one time in the 70s and 80s like that. We've always used, we try to use at least 50% of clay that comes from the area. And some of our clay bodies will be 75% local clay. But a couple of the places where people did from years and years ago, they went back and some people was using that clay and then that type thing. As long as it's not a big development or something built on places where the clay's at, it'll be okay. One of the problems we got into at one time with local clay was that land had changed hands or whatever. Like one of the earthenware clays that we use, Jim T, one of the tea potters, actually found the clay in the 40s. He's on a man's farm, about 4 miles from us. And all the potters in the area used that clay for years and years. And then when the man that owned the farm died, his family sold the farm off, and finally the person that owned it said, we just don't want you near the clay anymore. And that was the end of it. But it's, I think, and a lot of the clay that people find in the area, the new potters, a lot of the clay that they find and work with is what my daddy and Ben Owens Sr. and other people would have called dirt. You know, they tried it. It didn't
Particularly if you are in that revolution, how do you market to young people to increase to have an audience out there, or has that been done? Well, we do have a website, and we list times when kilns are coming out on the website, and marketing to young people is a challenge because they're always the up and coming folks that are going to buy pottery. But I see it as hopeful. I see people coming out of colleges that have pretty sophisticated taste, and they like handmade things. It's coming. It seemed like there was a lull for a few years, but I see it picking up, and we get lots of young folks coming in wanting to buy dinner sets for their weddings, and it's great for us. I mean, we see that as a great start because that's a couple that's probably going to want to collect for years, and people are buying them for their weddings. So they're finding out about the pottery. So it's a slow process, but it has worked. And like I said, we do have a website. We do send out email announcements and things. So that's a great tool, and we wouldn't want to do without it.
Yeah, I've got another question. I've been collecting ware from down there since I was in college, and I've gotten, and that was 61. So I've got some that probably is with the lead glaze in it. And I really never had a definitive way to know what was safe. I raised my children on some plates, and I've used it. I don't just look at it. I use it. But I need some guidance to know what's safe and what isn't of the early pieces that I made.
Well, how much orange juice did you drink out of your mug?
Not so much. Yeah. It's more flatware, plates,
Well, I think the pottery the lead glaze pottery made in North Carolina, nobody ever been bothered with it. As far as I'm concerned, because what they done, they come around and check the glazes on the pots, and they tell you where it makes allowed amount of leachable lead or not. Well, they checked every one of us that worked with lead, They never found any lead count in any of the potters in their area. And we'd work with pure red lead, which is supposed to be the most dangerous thing. And it's just a lot of the potters smoked, and they work one hand, they work in the glaze with a hand, red lead on one hand, and smoking all at the same time. And the big scare came from that came out of Mexico, and some child got poisoned with it, and that's what set it all off. And it's leachable, and what Pam said about the orange juice, because orange juice, we all pull the lid out worse than anything that's put in it, but as far as water or something else in a pitcher, ain't nobody ever been bothered with it. And it just, it's easy to break, so most people, I've seen plates, Mrs. Budby, she ate off on, cooked in it the whole time and everything. Her plates that were left there, the one was glaze left in the bottom of it, where people cut across the forks and knives, and she lived to be 86 years old. Didn't kill her. I think the pottery is, anybody that had older and the still wanted to use it, I'd say use it, it's no problem.
Or you can give it to us.
Yeah, that's, and most of it, value
done?
There's a lot of pottery being made throughout the state, North Carolina right now, Catawba Valley and western North Carolina, Pamela County, Seagrove. Do you find that there's a synergy amongst the potters? Are you learning from each other and sharing? If you go back 100 years, there probably was less of an opportunity to share and learn from each other.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the way the potters all visit with each other and that kind of thing this day and time, it's just, the information just passed around, you know. And, so it's, I mean, I think almost every potter has got a few secrets that they're not gonna put out. But as a general rule, it's, you know, everybody works together on it. In our area, the new potters all have more of a friendship, or whatever you want to call it, than the potters did back